things to you that have never been done before.
We the people tell the government what to do. It doesn't tell us. We the people are the driver. The government is the car. And we decide where it should go and by what route to do. We the people are free. And I hope we have once again reminded people that man is not free unless government is limited.
Well, g'day, folks. How are you? I hope you're doing all right for your Wednesday and life isn't treating you too poorly. I beg your pardon for last night. I had a few things that called me away and I couldn't get back in time for a show last night, which is tad unfortunate. So I do apologise for that. No, I wasn't being called in to fill in for Kyle or Jackie O for that matter on Kiss FM. Well, what an interesting time this has been if you're a radio person. And if you're a person who's taken any interest at all in the Kyle and Jackie O saga over the last God knows how long, they certainly have shown themselves to have a love-hate relationship with their audience. Their audience loves them. The parents of the audience or older generations seem to hate them, and that's okay because they're never designed to be the older audience's sort of radio station. However, they did manage to secure themselves a couple of years ago the largest radio deal in history, $200 million, $10 million a year each for 10 years. Pretty decent kind of a deal, unheard of in Australian radio terms. There was a contract involved, and the contract involved two parties. I beg your pardon, three parties if we're involved. Jackie had her own production company. Kyle has his own production company, and then, of course, ARN, the company that owns the radio stations they're heard on, have their side of the contract. Now, Kyle has, over the course of his career in the last 20 years, has given pause to enough radio station managers and, for that matter, enough of the radio industry overseers that he now has to do a radio show with a censor who sits in the studio or just outside the studio with a censor button. They're paid to remove anything that might get Kyle in trouble, get the radio network in trouble, or get them offside with listeners or potentially, more particularly, sponsors. That's pretty unheard of too. There's not in my entire career have I ever heard of anybody else in the industry requiring a censor. John Laws maybe at one stage, but I think he policed himself when he got caught doing all the free ads for his mates at Telstra and everywhere else, and Jones got caught doing that as well. A contra deal, if you like. But at any rate, the contracts involving Jackie and Kyle, while overpowering when it comes to the numbers, are also pretty basic in their composition. And it's the basic parts of a contract that get you. I was talking about this with a mate today. I said, where do you think this is going to go? He said, they'll all get a huge payout and, they'll move on. ARN will be happy to be rid of them because they're losing money hand over fist with them. And that's true. Jackie resigned yesterday, and that saved the network $100 million over the next 10 years. Their share price went up today on the back of it. Now, their share price has done nothing but go through the floor for I don't know how long, but today it jumped 8% on the news that all of a sudden they had an extra $100 million in the kitty because they didn't have to pay Jackie O. Pause that thought. Kyle and his company, Quasar Media, I think that's what it's called, also have the same contract deal, but he hasn't quit. Instead, what they've done at ARN is they've given him a very formal legal notice that he has breached his agreement with them, the contract with them, and he's breached it on the bounds that he has, overstepped. He's not quite brought them into disrepute, and I should have written it down, and I haven't got it here in front of me. But the legal terminology that they've used is quite significant. He now has 14 days to remedy the situation, or they will tear up his contract as well, and he will get nothing. He will get paid up until last Tuesday. because he wasn't on air today, so he get paid up till yesterday, which isn't bad at $43,000 a day. That's what his shift is worth to him, $43,000 a day. So he'll pick up Monday and Tuesday's wage, if you like, and won't get any more. And there will not be any payoff. Now, he's been bragging about having this contract since he got it, and, you know, how it's all in his favor. It's all his way. If they ever wanted to get rid of him because the ratings weren't working or for whatever other reason, they'd have to pay him out, and he's going to be a, 100 millionaire. Except if you break a very basic thing in your contract, or you commit an act which makes your contracted on-air partner fearful enough to say the words, "I don't feel safe returning to work. I don't feel safe to work with him." Now, whether or not Jackie thought that Kyle was going to fly off the handle and throw his coffee cup at her, or his golden microphone, or his dildo, or whatever else he was parading around that morning, I don't know. But what it does do with management is it triggers a set of circumstances, legal circumstances. That terminology, "I don't feel safe," means they have to go into protection mode over her. If Kyle had got in before her and said, "Listen, I don't feel safe, Jackie, coming back in," they'd have to protect him. But would they believe him? Probably not. But they still, if he had got in first, have a legal obligation to make sure that he's, not threatened by her and doesn't have to work with her if he doesn't want to. He didn't do that. She did. And then he's got 14 days to remedy the situation. So how does he remedy this situation? Because I have no doubt Kyle is still pretty keen on keeping his $10 million a year wage, his $43,000 a shift wage. By the way, if he doesn't turn up to work, he's fined the amount of the shift for the day. The network doesn't have to pay him that. So, but I guess, if you're making $43,000 a day, 5 days a week, you can afford to take 1 or 2 days off a fortnight, can't you? However, back to Kyle. So he now has to prove that he can remedy the situation in 14 days. Is he going to be able to talk Jackie into coming back? Even if he could, for whatever reason, she wound up talking to him, or they opened a channel of communication, because apparently they're not talking much at the moment. Even if he could, she has resigned. Her $100 million contract has been torn up. The Australian Stock Exchange had to be notified first, before anybody in the industry, before anybody in the radio station, before any of their team were told. The Australian Stock Exchange were notified first. That's how big a deal it is, because it makes a huge impact on the ARN stock, and a huge positive one, which I think was a bit of a surprise for all concerned. Can he make that happen? No, I don't think he can remedy the situation. So what can he do to remedy the situation? Well, he could offer to pay whatever the price is to Jackie. Give her going away golden parachute. Now, that'll be in the millions of dollars, so that ARN don't have to wear that. Okay, it was my mistake. All right, no worries. You don't have to pay her anything. I'll pay it all out. That'll be all right. But that is also an admission of guilt. We all know how Kyle goes with admissions of guilt. So don't know that would happen either. I mean, they could maybe sign an NDA, which meant that if there was an admission of guilt, or it could be a no admission of guilt, here's a payment kind of thing. So, yeah, variety of reasons. Anyway, do any of us really care? The show was never going to work nationally. Kyle's arrogance, not taking away from the fact he's a very good broadcaster, and he is a very good broadcaster. But Kyle, on this occasion, has let his ego get way ahead of his brain. Kyle has shown that he is emotionally unaware of doing damage to a woman he has worked extremely closely to. I mean, he spent as much time with this woman, if not more, well, certainly more than his current wife, in a lifetime. He spent 27 years with Jackie O. Now, the big question for Kyle is, Will anybody just listen to Kyle? You could argue Howard Stern gets an audience, or used to, in America, and Kyle idolizes Howard Stern. In fact, their program is based a lot on what Howard Stern did in the past and does today on the Sirius satellite network. But I don't think he can pull it off. I don't think Kyle by himself is capable of holding a breakfast show in Sydney, much less anywhere else. He requires a great deal of people around him to support what he does, and he gives orders, barks orders, and that's fine because he generally has a pretty good feel for what the audience want to hear. But he has his minions working for them. Well, right now, the minions have been halved at the very least, although Kyle, I believe, will pay the lion's share of those wages. The little team that they have working for them, it's not so little. I think there's 12 or 15 people working for them. Producers, all sorts of censor, other things. They're paid by Kyle and Jackie O, or most of them are. So should the show's now ended, some of them have been put on leave or told to go home until we figure out what to do with you. And that means some of them might get re-employed by ARN for whoever steps in to do the new breakfast show. And there's a fight going on in radio at the moment as to who will step in. You can be guaranteed that whatever steps into the breakfast shows at Kiss FM in Sydney will not be heard in Melbourne. I'm pretty sure they cancelled Kyle and Jackie O into Melbourne this year anyway. And if they hadn't done it yet, they were very soon to do it. It's been an absolute failure and a laughingstock in Melbourne. They were going to start Kyle and Jackie O in Brisbane at the start of this year, and they were so confident of the success that they were going to have that in November of last year, they sacked the 3 breakfast personalities who'd been doing, 2 of them been doing the show for a very long time. There's a lovely lady who's been working in the industry in Queensland, particularly in Brisbane for the last 30 years or more. Her name is Robin Bailey. Beautiful, lovely, wonderfully talented lady. And she has been part of breakfast shows around Brisbane, but predominantly with the ARN network for the last, 15 or 20 years. And she's a stalwart, right? The people of Brisbane just love her. And the guy who was pushing the buttons in the show, Kip, they love him too. And they managed to get themselves a Bronco last year. A retiring Bronco joined the team as a full-time member of their show. And you can imagine what a Bronco in Brisbane would be like. Already, pretty good gathering an audience. Now, they weren't number 1 in the ratings, but they were very strong. And in November last year, the management of ARN sacked them. They didn't say they were bringing Kyle and Jackie O this year, but a few weeks later they did. And to their credit, the breakfast team, rather than finish out the embarrassing 2 weeks and, look after the management, who certainly weren't looking after them in any way, shape or form, they walked out. And good luck to them. In December, when a new managing director took over, it became very apparent that Kyle and Jackie O were not going to work in Brisbane. This bloke had to go back to those 3 members, cap in hand, and re-employ them. And they ran a huge campaign of, sorry, mea culpa, we got it wrong kind of thing. And Rob and Kip and Corey will be back in January, which they were and are today. Doing great. Local radio, local faces, particularly breakfast shows, are very, very, very important. So Kyle, I don't know, don't think he can handle it by himself. And let's face it, who would want to go and work for him or with him? Because you can be guaranteed you're not going to get paid $10 million a year if you offer to sit in the chair opposite Kyle. You'll be lucky to get paid $100,000 a year, probably $80,000 a year, and you'll have to live in a 1-bedroom flat somewhere out in Western Sydney and drive for 3 hours to get to work every day because you won't be able to afford to live any closer. That's how radio works. Beautiful, wonderful people they are. Kyle, on the other hand, could have the contract torn up, and what would he do? Well, immediately, I had thought today he probably got on a plane last night and went straight to the US, to his house there, where he can sulk in private and not get hassled with the paparazzi too much. But they're currently filming Idol. So he's a judge on idle. So there'd be no getting on a plane and running out of the country unless, of course, he could all of a sudden convince them that, hey, listen, we're going to LA to meet my mate Snoop Dogg and do a lesson or something. I don't know. So he's probably going to be here in Australia still. I don't know that we're going to hear too much out of him over the next 2 weeks. If he's got half a brain, he'll keep his mouth very quiet, and he might yet walk away with something. But I can tell you from what I've heard that ARN are extremely motivated to see him walk away with his last paycheck and not a cent more. There's a lot of members on that board who don't like Coil very much because he's bragged about how much he's being paid and how hard it would be for them to ever get out of not paying him the full amount of the contract. And he gave them all the ammunition they needed. Shot like a duck in a barrel. And they didn't even have to set him up. All they had to do was wait. It was very impressive. Speaking of impressive, Alex Antic has put a move on and last night managed to get it moved through the Senate that some sort of internal briefing is going to take place regarding Australians mentioned in the Epstein files. That would be every Australian mentioned in the Epstein files. Now, he's put forward a motion that's asked every security agency and the Prime Minister and Office of Cabinet and the Foreign Affairs Department, Department of Home Affairs, and told them all, as part of his bill that he put forward, or his motion that he put through last night, to get every piece of documentation on everybody, what is known about everybody that's in the Epstein files, and present it to them. Well, more particularly to him. That'll be interesting. A lot of people get very excited about Clive Palmer's in the Epstein files. Clive Palmer's in the Epstein files. He's mentioned like once in a conversation with Steve Bannon and Epstein. And the context of it is Bannon bragging about how he got Clive to change the name to Patriot of Trumpets or whatever the hell it was, and spend $61 million on an advertising campaign to try and steal the election away from Labor. That's about the context of how Clive is mentioned. He doesn't show up, as far as I can see or am aware, anywhere else in the Epstein files. I've got a copy of them here. You can do a word search. It's not hard. Catherine Keating, on the other hand, Paul Keating, former Prime Minister Paul Keating's daughter, she raises more than one mention. In fact, she raises quite a lot of mentions, and her sister. Now, I don't know exactly the context, dinner parties, that kind of thing. That's the context that we're advised. I haven't read every word of every mention, obviously, but the general feeling around her involvement has been, and the story that's been pushed out when she's been mentioned before, is she was only ever involved from a perspective. She was new in town. She was a prime minister or former prime minister's daughter, well, current prime minister's daughter, so she had a bit of swag. She was trying to break into the fashion industry in New York and knew a few people, wound up in those sorts of things. Anyway, let's see what comes out. It should be very, very, very interesting. I've got to say, the Jim Carrey thing has been playing on my mind. I know a lot of people have seen the Jim Carrey impersonator that was in Paris last weekend. There is, if you are interested in people who can remote view, there is a very interesting remote viewer whose name is Elizabeth. It'll come to me. Elizabeth someone, I'll get it for you. But she has done a remote view on Jim Carrey. And she's done the Elizabeth April, her name is. You can find that on YouTube. Her deep dive on Jim Carrey led her to have a conversation with his soul. He is on the other side. Very interesting conversation. Very interesting conversation where he she asks questions. He elaborates on his involvement about how he signed a contract many, many, many years ago without really understanding what it really meant. And when he did discover what it meant after being called into these rituals and other sorts of things that they get into, he started pushing back, and he didn't want to be involved, didn't want to be involved. He did some years ago, and I remember this. I remember him in an interview. He said, "This will be my last interview. I'm retiring. I'm going to become a hermit, and if you ever see me again, it won't be me." That's all he said. Disappeared. But we did see him again from time to time doing things, and was it really him? Apparently, what we saw in Paris was one of his 3 clones. The other 2 haven't actually been switched on yet, or however that works, but that was one of his 3 clones. They never wanted him to be cloned, or to have to use a clone, or to put people in masks and have them pretend to be Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey presented them a very unique problem with that, in that while even if they cloned him, they could get a lot of him right. If that was his clone, they screwed up the eye color somehow horrendously. But that with the cloning side of things, if they had of been able to, they would have replaced him 10 or more years ago. Instead, they knew that the clone or anybody in a mask could not replicate his creativity. They could not replicate his comic genius. They could not replicate his timing or his innate abilities. And therefore, it was easier to shove him out, let him live, as he said, in Hawaii, under an assumed name for the last 10 years. And they came and got rid of him at whatever point, and they've rolled out this whatever that was in Paris last weekend. So I'm wondering whether or not they didn't do the same thing with Kelly Osbourne. I mean, I remember that kid from the Osbournes TV show back in the day. And I mean, Ozzy Osbourne, okay, Ozzy'd led a pretty rough life. There is absolutely no doubt which side of Jesus's fence he was on. And you've got to say that the family, Sharon, has certainly exhibited similar traits. And now people are starting to get worried about Kelly. I have no idea why. Would you? Ridiculous. People are worrying about Donald Trump. He's got a nasty rash. I don't know that that's a rash. Shall we have a closer look? Let's have a look. This, well, it certainly does look uncomfortable. It actually looks a bit painful. And it doesn't look like it was created by his shirt collar. Some years ago, right here on the tip of my nose, I had a skin cancer that wasn't anything dangerous. It was just a lot of dry skin, and it would always stay dry, or it would then flake off and it'd blister or it'd get sore. It was just a pain in the ass. Never looked very good. So I went to a doctor and I said, without cutting my nose off, how can we fix that? And he said, oh, well, we stick this, a dab of this stuff on your nose once every 3 days. And I said, oh, yeah, what'll it do? And he said, it'll burn it all out. Effudex, I think it was called. And I remember putting that stuff on my nose once every 3 days for about a month. And I honestly, there were times I wanted to cut my nose off. It hurt so bad. However, that looks more like a treatment for a skin cancer than some alien breaking out of him. I'm guessing. Don't you think? I'm guessing. All right. Moving on. There's been some pretty frightening things coming out of this new war. Are we even allowed to call it a war? Apparently only Congress can declare war. So we're going to call this a skirmish between Israel, the United States, and Iran. Now, just as an aside, people in Dubai or the United Arab Emirates have been advised by the government there that if they share any video from unconfirmed sources showing bombs raining down or drones flying past their bedroom windows, that they stand to cop a fine of what amounts to be 77,000 Australian dollars. That would be a bit nasty. Why are they doing this? Well, they're trying to combat the news or the media getting out that, and if it is still happening, that there are ballistic missiles raining down on Dubai, not just on the two airports that are there, although the is it the El Maktoum? One of them has our Australian base at it. Now, can I just point out that airport where the Australian base is at is one of the international airports. We have a very, very, very small portion, which might involve a hangar or two and some office space. We have less than 80 staff over there at the moment. And I happen to know a couple who are there. The airports haven't been cratered. There is no damage there. They have hit a couple of American sections of the base because the airport houses not just Australia. It has some American assets there as well, some British assets there as well, and probably some other allied assets. Like I say, it's a desert. They can build the runways and the aprons as big as they like, and they do. So great that no Australians have been hurt, injured, or involved at this stage in any way. No Australian assets have been employed in this war so far, and I think Britain is the same. Interesting that Keir Starmer and Albo Sleazy seem to be speaking from the same thing at the moment. So let's just have a little bit of a look at the area, what we're sort of talking about here. So Iran is being bombed, and you can clearly see where Iran is. If you're not quite sure where Israel is, let's blow it up a bit. Israel's down there, all right? Blow it back out again. So Iran, way over there on the right, Israel over there on the left. In between them, Jordan, Syria, and Iraq. Now, no problems throwing missiles, bombs, and all that sort of stuff over those areas. They've been very happily doing that at each other for the last 5 days, let's call it. However, today, out of Israel came a little more interesting news. And this came from a senior government official who's been there forever. Now, before I show you what he had to say, I want to show you another map. Now, this is a map of Israel. And there is a little place there called Tel Megiddo. We'll go in again. This is a much older map of the same area. How do I know it's older? It's because they're calling it Galilee and Samaria rather than Israel. And in there is, in red, you'll see a little place called Megiddo, better known this day as Armageddon. Now, Black Sheep and I must be on a bit of a parallel here because I was doing some research into this afternoon, and Black Sheep texts me with a picture of Armageddon. So unfortunately, I'd already pulled a few of my own, so I won't bother showing you his. But this is Armageddon. It is a mound in the north of Israel. And as you can see, it's quite a sizable mound. It's not really a hill, it's just a mound. So to get a mound generally means you've got to bury some shit and have more shit on top of it, and eventually stuff grows over it, turns into a mound. And this is a very interesting excavation site or archaeological site, because in the last however many years they've been digging in the mound at Armageddon, they have been discovering many civilizations built one on top of the other. So as they get deeper and deeper into the layers of the mound, they're finding civilizations dating back to 7000 BC. And amongst other interesting little facts, they're pulling out all sorts of artifacts which have piqued the interest, shall we say, of certain American secretaries of state a few years ago. These would be in line with the Gilgamesh missions that were sent out by Hillary Clinton. So a little bit about why so many battles happened at Armageddon, because it was also a battle site, and may be a reason why it was chosen as the place where whoever won the latest battle set up and protected access to a valley that is right beside it there. Now, they've been fighting in that valley since Pharaoh's time, since 1500 BC. In fact, a couple of pharaohs had fought through there over the years, but it wasn't really until a battle that caught my interest and made me start thinking a little deeper about the whole Armageddon thing. That battle happened in 1918. It was between the British General Army, headed by a guy named Allenby, and they defeated the Ottoman Empire. What was the Ottoman Empire? You see Turkey? You see Iraq, Syria, Kurdistan? All that. So I thought, wow, that's interesting. It's been, you know, a home of war forever, for centuries and centuries and centuries. And it just happens to be the place where the British defeated the Ottoman army so that they could take over Palestine at the end of the Second World War. Now, as we know, the Balfour Agreement, instigated by the Rothschilds, where they instructed the British government to hand over the land currently known as Israel to the Jews so that they could have their own land. This is not in dispute. You can please, if you don't understand it, please go and look up the Balfour Agreement. All right? You can see who signed it. And if you can't read the first name, you will be able to read Rothschild at the bottom, have absolutely no doubt. And in fact, there are a number of interviews with Lord Rothschild explaining the Balfour Agreement if you want to dig a little deeper. Some of them actually have video attached and worthwhile watching. And no, definitely not AI. So what is the biblical meaning of Armageddon? Well, it's only ever used once in the Bible. And it's used in the book of Revelation. And it describes the place where the kings of the earth gather for the final battle between good and evil. That would be before the world ends. Because I think that's pretty much how the book of Revelation ends. You should read it. It's quite an interesting story. You know, isn't it interesting that these things come to light? Anyway, Armageddon being what it is, a place where battles are fought between good and evil and, you know, tyrants reign supreme. Today, as I said to you a few days ago, Israel will not be satisfied with firing on Iran, and should they be able to remove every missile launcher, every missile, every drone, and every Iranian Republican Guard member, they're not going to stop. And today, they said the quiet part out loud. Now, today, the fella that you are about to see, let me just bring up my little... see, that's what happens when you have to reboot your computer just before you start things up. I have had a little sheet with everybody's name written on it, and that's the wrong sheet. And that's the wrong sheet. Let's hope there's still a sheet here. Not looking good. Looks like I've not saved that sheet. Bloody hell. Anyway, his name is Negri, thereabouts, something like that. He is a Jewish politician. He's been sitting in the Knesset or whatever it is for bloody ever. He is not known for anything particularly, right? He's just another one of the run-of-the-mill Zionists that operate in Israel. But today he came and said the quiet bit out loud.
Threat is emerging. I want to be very clear. Turkey and Qatar have gained influence in Syria, are seeking influence elsewhere and everywhere throughout the region. And from here, I warn, Turkey is the new Iran.
How's that for a spattering of applause? Turkey is the new Iran. Now, they haven't managed yet to kill everything in Iran. I'm not sure that they've stopped the drones flying. I'm not sure that they've stopped the ballistic missiles, which have been hammering cities all around the Middle East, cities that thought they were untouchable should Iran get carried away. It has been proven that with Russian and Chinese help, the Iranians have outsmarted the Israelis and the Americans in a number of ways in this engagement, and not the least of which is the fact that Iran has been making weapons for this engagement for the last 40 years or more. They have been stockpiling those weapons in tunnels, which we are not sure the American bunker busters carried by the B-2 bombers the night before last actually hit or came close. And we're pretty confident that if they did hit those tunnels, they only had 4 bombs. We're pretty confident that Iran has those missiles, those drones, those launchers stored in multiple places in very deep tunnels, which are going to require a bit more than 4 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs. The B-2, obviously the stealth B-2, the thing that looks like a dart, it didn't land anywhere in the area of regard. In fact, they left America, they flew, did their mission, and a couple of them wound up landing in the UK, I'm led to believe. There is 2 more that wound up back in the States, apparently. But why split them up? Don't know. The B-1 Bones were in the next night, and they apparently, which are pretty stealthy, pretty quick, able to carry a lot of munitions on a rotating launcher that come. Anyway, they're a beautiful aircraft. Old, but very, very, very worthy. And apparently they've cleaned up every radar site in Iran. Americans are now claiming total air superiority. And if they are claiming total air superiority, I am wondering why Dubai, Bahrain, Doha aren't opening their airports. If those ballistic missiles being launched out of Iran can no longer be launched, if those drones can no longer take off and have no command and control structure left to guide them, which I seriously doubt, because that command and control structure is being put forward by other nations. It's just going to keep going. But now Israel have decided Turkey is the next great threat. And why is that?
Erdogan is sophisticated, dangerous, and he seeks to encircle Israel. We can't close our...
Erdogan, that's President Erdogan or whatever, however you say it, from Turkey, is seeking to surround Israel. Have you ever heard of that before? Have you ever heard of Turkey trying to surround Israel? I mean, I know they're not friends, and that's the whole Jewish-Arab kind of thing coming together. But I've never heard Turkey make too many threats, much less, bomb them. But Turkey have been involved in Syria with certain actions against rebels, particularly the Kurds. I'm not big fans of the Kurds. But I don't know where they get off. Anyway, it's all getting a little weird, isn't it? What would happen if Israel decided to pick a fight with Turkey? Because Turkey are pretty well equipped, very well equipped. Would Israel be able to pick a fight with Turkey without America? I don't think so. Why would America get involved with the fight with Turkey? Because Turkey, as near as I can ascertain, have done nothing to America. They pose no significant threat to America. There is no clear and present danger. So I can't see how the Americans could be involved, although we probably said that when it came to Iran, because once again, while they speak a lot, although Trump has said that the Ayatollah signed off on 2 assassination attempts of Donald Trump. So I guess that's fair enough. You can go and blow a country up if they try and kill you a couple of times. That seems fair. Will the world be a better place? Well, remains to be seen. You know, power abhors a vacuum. So they were apparently having a vote for the new Ayatollah in a undisclosed city somewhere well outside of Tehran. There were 40 people involved in that vote, and none of them walked out of the room alive, just as they were counting the votes. At least that's the stories that the Americans would tell you. Of course, the first casualty in a war is truth. So take that what you will. Use your discernment as best as you can. And, well, keep your chin up, I guess, because it's going to get very, very serious before it gets better. Price of fuel already scaring people. Oh, God, our fuel's going to go through the roof. In fact, there is a headline in one of the mainstream online rags. Australia's fuel has already hit $4 a litre. Well, $3.99 or $3.95 a litre is what they're paying for fuel in Arnhem Land. In the middle of nowhere, Arnhem Land, 560 kilometres east of Darwin. That's where they've gone to check the fuel price. $3.95 a litre. Now, yes, bloody expensive. But anybody with a 4-wheel drive or anybody with a caravan and anybody who has travelled out that way and travelled around this great nation will tell you that in outback regional Australia, you can pay a lot more than $3.95 a litre for your fuel. A lot more. I'm not saying that it's great or that's good, but certainly $3.95 a litre from where this particular petrol station is located doesn't seem unreasonable to me. It's a long way from anywhere. And I wouldn't like to have to pay it. Don't think it's right that we should have to pay it, but to make that sound like it's happening right across Australia, well, I don't know. Is that like you? Is that price in your area? Because I went and got diesel today, and it cost $1.79.9 a litre. The unleaded fuel at the same fuel station was $1.76 a litre. From memory, $1.76.9. So haven't seen fuel jumps particularly where I am at the moment. Not to say they're not coming, but we have no supposed real reason to panic. People in Sydney, morons who would fight over toilet paper, seems they will also start fights over fuel. It's sad. All I can advise you folks is buy a roll of toilet paper or buy a few rolls in a packet, just one packet, when you do the shopping. Don't go and buy all the toilet paper yet. When your car needs fuel, go and fill it up. That would be my advice. And then watch your fuel gauge. If your fuel gauge gets to 3/4, go and fill it up again. All right, that'll be the cheapest fuel you get if this goes up, because you'll only need to top up that 25 litres or so from full to 3/4. And you'll still have a full tank of fuel to escape out to wherever your little hidey will be. All right? And should we not have any fuel, you'll have 3/4 of a tank at least to get you in and out of emergency situations, or to get you to friends and family or closer to them or whatever. Obviously, there might be a time where you might want to go and fill up a few jerry cans, but this isn't the time. If we freak out now, given the absolute piss-poor state that consecutive Australian governments have left our fuel situation in, we're going to be in dire straits a lot sooner. Now, the Labor government are using mealy-mouthed words again, saying that we have X amount of days of fuel, 34 for diesel, 32, I think it was yesterday for petrol. They're not saying that all that is on shore, is actually landed here in Australia yet. A lot of it is still sitting on a boat somewhere between the Gulf, somewhere between Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, and here. Because we get our fuel from Korea, Thailand, Singapore, and, well, we send our oil out to Singapore, and they share that out, hopefully, to other places and try and return some of it to us. We are not fuel dependent. Well, we are fuel dependent. We're fuel dependent on the rest of the world rather than here in this country. And that's something that has to change. I'm really pleased to see that One Nation and the Katter Party are all over that, and they're trying to raise investment. I was going to say money, but they're not trying to raise the money. They're trying to raise the interest in building new refineries here in Australia and looking at getting the companies who own the mineral rights to things like the shale oil grounds at Mooney Mooney in Central Australia, amongst other places, which are very new, and there are billions of barrels of oil there that is usable, easily refinable into other product. And at the moment, I think it's Shell have the contract for it, but they're not doing anything with it. Well, Shell, you used to, I think you still do, have a refinery in Geelong that is, for the most part, been shut down and, you know, alienated. About time we built another one. I could care less if you build it in Coober Pedy. It would probably be the closest place to the Mooney Mooney grounds. And then we ship it all out of there. I don't care. You've got a port 500 kilometres south, 600 kilometres south at Port Augusta, where you could ship your fuel out easily if you had a refinery there. Imagine the jobs that could be created. I don't know. It seems that only filth like us think about these things,
senators who represent the filth of this country, the filth of this country, the filth of this country.
That is the filth right there. Lydia Thorpe. Now, I'm not going into bat here for Pauline Hanson. She doesn't need me to go into bat for her, or anybody else for that matter. I am totally disgusted that we have individuals in that place who feel that it's okay to get up and call One Nation supporters the filth of this country. This, if you like, is just like Hillary Clinton's bucket of deplorables moment, where Trump only attracts the deplorables in the nation, the deplorable human beings. Now, if Albanese had said this, it would be a huge win. But because this green piece of filth, Lydia Thorpe, who claims some sort of aboriginality and connection to land, seriously has no connection to brain.
This speech, but it's very disappointing to see some so-called senators who represent the filth of this country, which is racists out there, that we know contributes to incarceration, contributes to ill health, contributes to so much hurt and division in this country because of the racist words that come out of Pauline Hanson's mouth.
Order. Senator Thorpe, with withdraw.
She was ordered to withdraw. Why should I have to withdraw? Why should I? You don't keep them. No. Fair income. That sort of behaviour from people representing us in the Australian Senate. I am simply disgusted that we have people of that caliber representing us there. And she is whinging because people are supposedly calling her names. I don't know why people would make memes about her like that. It's cruel and unusual punishment, don't you think? But if there was a bitch that day in that place, then I think she pointed herself out to be the dumb bitch in that place. Unfortunately, she will probably get elected again and again because she's sitting with the Greens. And we all know how much intelligence they have. Don't you reckon? Censures. So this leads me to, Pauline Hanson was censured by the Parliament because she had the balls to stand up and speak on our behalf on a range of subjects. The fact that she said things that people in the Senate didn't wish to hear, not because they were racist, not because they were, in any way divisive. It was simply because she wanted the best for the Australian people. Now, the theatre of Parliament was enacted. Penny Wong, looking forward to the day that she has to explain a few things. Penny Wong used the mechanism of Parliament, and the sycophantic weak dicks that follow the Labor Party and follow the directions of the Labor Party all signed onto it. And I include the weak dicks there as the Liberals and Nationals who signed it, because I'm pretty sure there were quite a few of them who did that too. So I asked myself, what the hell does that really mean? So she's been censured again. Well, I went and looked up what being censured actually means. What is the punishment for being censured? She could be thrown out again, but they didn't throw her out. They censured her. So, boo. Apparently, censure is a letter from the President of the Senate that says, a lot of the members here are pretty unhappy about what you said about that in that speech. Consider yourself censured. And they send that to her. I'd probably put that up in a frame and put it up behind my desk in my office if I was Pauline Hanson. Because when you get a censure against you, you've probably hit a nerve, one they desperately don't want us to hear anything about. So they can't argue about it with her in that place. They have to shut her down, as they would shut down Babbitt or anybody else who wanted to stand up and speak actual truth in that place. The day has to come, people, where we need to make those that are representing us in that place accountable. A bit like the public servants. While I was on a kick trying to figure out the punishment for a censure, I decided to ask, what is the punishment for lying in a Senate estimates meeting? And I think it was ChatGPT I was using, tried to tell me that, well, punishment is a strong word. There isn't really a punishment. There's a process. I imagine somebody writes a letter and somebody receives a letter that says, well, we don't think you're being too forthcoming with us. We think you were hiding things or obfuscating. And because the bureaucrats, ladies and gentlemen, and this is the beautifulness of this plan, because the bureaucrats are the ones that actually write the law, right? They're the ones that go away, have done all the learning to put it all into legalese and present it to their minister to say, here's the bill you want to push forward. And inside all of those mechanisms, they have built in their own escape routes. Okay? Now, except in very distinct and very obvious circumstances where a public servant has screwed up, they can pretty much avoid any kind of punishment that you or I would deem a punishment, because the public service looks after them. Now, yes, there is a mechanism to take public servants to court and to jail them if they give the Senate information that is erroneous or wrong, or they tell lies. The question is, and we have caught them lying, we have caught them obfuscating, we have caught them coming completely unprepared to Senate estimates meeting where they take, if there are 9 questions asked, they take 7 of them on notice and argue about the other 2 that you don't need to know about anything to do with those 2 subjects. And then they take the other 7 on notice. Right now, the Albanese government has over 50 reports that were meant to be released within 6 months of being produced. The government has to produce those reports publicly within 6 months. There are over 50 of them that the government aren't releasing, aren't touching, don't want us to know about. They don't want us to see what they're really doing. Now, I don't know if you know people who vote Labor in your part of the world, but seriously, we need to ask them, do they have a brain injury? What part of this is okay or this is not okay do they not understand? And you could ask the same of your Liberal voting friends or your National voting friends or your Greens voting friends. How is this acceptable? Where did the party must win at all times become more powerful than the people must win at all times? Because I didn't vote for that. I don't vote for much, but I would have voted against that. I would have gone and got myself registered and everything to vote against that, as I'm sure many of you would have. Here's what it is. On a closing note, if you're unsure how Iran is doing so well against all this great technology that America and Israel have, let me tell you, it's all to do with Russia and China, and a bit to do with Ukraine. America has been sending all its older weapons, technologies, and systems to Ukraine to help them defend against the Russian invasion over there. And of course, Joe Biden has been sending as much as he possibly could, money, weapons, all sorts of stuff. And it seemed like a never-ending parade of weapons technologies being taken out of the back door of Americans' armories and put on a plane or put on a boat, and it winds up in Ukraine being fired at the Russians. That's left a huge hole in their stockpiles. You see, they've been supplying Patriot and THAAD missile systems. That's the anti-air missile systems that have been shooting down the Russian drones and the Russian missiles that have been coming into Ukraine. Don't know how well they've been doing it, but they've been certainly firing off a lot of them. And now they don't got any more. Israel is in the same boat with its Iron Dome. Now, I'm not seeing any great vision coming out of Israel at all about whether they're being attacked on a daily, nightly, 24-hour-7 basis, whether there's explosions in the streets or anything else. But what I am going to tell you, folks, is that if Turkey is now the great Satan rather than Iran, it will not be long, I guarantee you, that the Islamic temple in Jerusalem gets blown up and leveled by Iran's errant bomb or Turkey's errant bomb. It won't be a missile from outside the borders that destroys this place. It will be done by the Israelis themselves, and they will blame Turkey or Iran or Syria or terrorist agents from Hamas, or maybe a couple of drunken Palestinians managed to break through the wire and do it themselves with a couple of homemade rockets. But have absolutely no doubt the Jewish dream would be to blow that mosque out of Israel. And you know what they would build on top of it? Yep, the next temple. Go and look at your Bible edicts there, folks. And how are Iran doing so well with everything? And the Russian, China, where does China come in with the help? Well, Russia has a very, very, very good GPS system. GPS, for the most part in the world, is American. But there are a large number of countries, including Iran, India, I think, have subscribed to it now, and others, who don't use the American GPS system because in times of war, the Americans can turn it off. That's exactly what happened the day MH370 went missing. I have 3 GPSs working in my car that day, and they all stopped. So weird. They can manipulate the GPS system. They can actually pull you off track, put false tracks into all sorts of stuff. So the Russians developed their own, and so did the Chinese. Now, the Russians developed chips to go inside their drones, which are pretty sophisticated drones. These chips deal with the Russian satellite guidance systems. They're very strong and cannot be jammed, cannot be fuzzed, cannot be interfered with by the American GPS fuzzing systems, usually put together in our F-18 Growlers. The Growler can carry a whole heap of electronics packages to suit its mission, and they would stick a package for that kind of thing on there. So, interesting days. We could see the blowing up of that mosque in Israel or in Jerusalem as a catalyst, potentially to keep America in the war. And if Turkey came down to protect themselves, and if Israel went up to protect themselves, I just wonder whether or not the war won't be right there. With a little bit of China's help, because that is a satellite receiving ship, folks. And with that ship, which is not far from Iran, it's been involved a week ago with what used to be the Iranian Navy. That ship there is receiving and transmitting live satellite data to Tehran, to the Iranian Republican Guard, and allowing tracking details from the Russian and Chinese GPS systems, which have now been re-engineered and placed inside God knows how many thousands of these drones that Iran has been building for years. Now, that thing can track a fly at ground level from the satellite. And that's how they're steering these things with such accuracy. That's how they're getting them to hit places that hitherto thought themselves unhittable. Places like the British base in Cyprus being one of them. And even though the British aren't coming out to fight, the Greeks have got their navy into the war. They've come out to protect Cyprus. God love them. The Poms, they want no part of this war at all. Still waiting to figure out why. And to finish with, this was a picture taken off Cuba last week. We're all still trying to figure out exactly what it might be. It's not photoshopped. We know that much. That, for me, to all intents and purposes, if I had a magic pen, I'd draw a UFO above those 3 lines and say it's taking on water. It looks to me like it's drawing water up, although it's hard to tell, I suppose. But ask yourself, unless they're just emptying out their sewage, why would a UFO be hovering over the ocean? So anyway, I thought that you might find that one rather interesting. It's a bit of a tweaker to end the day on. So Sandy, I don't know if you'll still be awake. I saw a message from you earlier saying you've been up since 1:30 in the morning. God love you, woman. I hope that everything is going well with the Donkey Sanctuary. And folks, if you want to help out, it's a very slow grind getting to our lottery. If you would like to help us get to the end of this lottery, that would be awesome. Unfortunately, people in Victoria can't buy tickets anymore because of, well, I've explained before, but Jacinta Allen and their rules down there make sure you don't get anything at all for nothing. But we would love to have you a part of it. Please head over to merch.vofhq.com, click on the Donkey Sanctuary 750 link, and you'll be able to, for $2, maybe win yourself $750. We'd love to do that for you. And you'll be helping out the Donkey Sanctuary. We'll be able to send them a bit of money for half a bale of hay, or maybe get 2 hooves done or 3 teeth the next time there's a servicing required. At any rate, a little bit there, a little bit here, all little bits help. You could also help by maybe popping into our shop and checking out the merch section. We have got some pretty cool cups, and the cups are going pretty well. A lot of you, like me, are very enamored with the word cacistocracy because it's so real and it opens up such interesting conversations with people. So that one and another one is available on cups. I think we've got a shirt or 2 with that on it, a few other bits and pieces. Vince was going to be doing a little bit of work on some designs. Sunflower, you asked me about V-necks. Yes, we are putting V-necks up, and in fact, there may already be some V-neck T-shirts up. I'm not quite sure. I'll have to go and look and see if Vince has done any for the Voice of Freedom, because, you know, he's looking after himself pretty well. So I'm just going to say I see a lot of FBN stuff, but I don't see too much Voice of Freedom. Having a bit of fun with you. Have yourselves a bloody good night, folks. Be safe on the roads, because those dickheads are out there everywhere. And given what's going on in the world, our petrol prices might go up. That could keep a few of them off the road, but we're going to have to wait for that to happen. So stay safe. Talk to you tomorrow night.
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up. Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life. It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back. Does anybody else want to stay? Let's rock!